What's up, everybody? It's Megan here at the Financially Free Era podcast by SLP Wealth. I'm joined by Sim today, and we're going to be chatting about some probably heavier stuff, the student loan news that broke last week with the Senate bill proposal that came out. We've had the House bill for a little bit now, and that wasn't so positive. And we were waiting on this Senate bill proposal to come out as well, and that did, sure enough, last week, and it is not so hot either. So we want to break down some things in this proposal, what it means, really just kind of vent, honestly, talk through how kind of misguided maybe some of this is and how tone deaf a lot of this is, in my opinion. So we'll talk a lot about our opinions today. But thanks, Sim,
The
for joining
TL
me.
the TLDR of today's episode, if you don't feel like chatting with us for half an hour, is it all sucks for
Yeah.
borrowers.
If it's passed, correct. So, yeah, that's another thing to mention is that this Senate bill is a proposal. It's not something that's been passed, but since the House and the Senate bills, not they don't mirror each other, but they're very similar. They're like tooting the same horn, tooting the same tune. It just doesn't look good for what's formally going to get passed in the future. And so that's what we want to kind of brace for and prepare borrowers for because this will affect people's financial plans. One of the articles I want to reference a lot to start out is an article on Forbes by Adam Minsky. He is a contributor to the SLP article or blogs that we put out as well. He's a great writer. He follows this stuff very closely. He's a student loan attorney. So he's got a really good like legal perspective to this. But he wrote an article titled "Senate GOP endorses repeal of student loan forgiveness and IDR plans." So that's what I meant by saying like the Senate bill does toot the same horn with trying to repeal some of the student loan forgiveness and the IDR repayment options that we've known for so long and that have been such a relief to folks who are kind of trapped in this crazy student loan environment that we're in where the cost of attendance is wild and to be a doctor, to be a vet, to be a medical professional, to go get these degrees, to be this job, this career path, like you have to borrow. Like there's no way around it unless you come from money. So I want to kind
Hell,
of summarize that.
even just to get an undergrad degree at
Yeah.
this point,
God, I can't believe how many undergrad degrees these days are like 60 to 70,000 a semester for the cost of attendance. It's nutso, like
it's so
wild.
annoying too when we like build financial plans for our clients. Like we're modeling inflation, we use
Yeah.
3%. And it's like, okay, let's model college costs for your children. We use 5%. So
hmm
college costs we project are going to continue to outpace inflation.
Yeah. Some of the stuff that's in this bill proposal could change that. What maybe we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how it should change things if stuff comes out the way it's supposed to in this bill. But okay, so basically Republican lawmakers in the Senate they unveiled their version of the big beautiful reconciliation bill that the House they had came out with their portion last month. And again, it was something we were waiting on. We were seeing if they were going to have any different things in here. But basically, in a nutshell, what it was supposed to have is what they wanted to do with student loan repayment. Were they going to keep SAVE? Were they going to keep the other income-driven repayment plans? What other terms and conditions would change? Would there be changes to forbearances or deferments? Would there be changes to PSLF, to borrowing limits? That was another thing we were waiting to see. Like, are they going to change how much you can borrow to go to school? Because at this point, for a graduate degree, the cost of attendance, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance in a federal loan. It would be a combination of probably an unsubsidized loan and a graduate plus loan, but you could borrow up to the cost of attendance. So if you're going to, med school or dental school, and they say it's going to be 100 grand a year for your tuition and your cost of attendance altogether, you could borrow that in federal loans. Wild, right? And that's always been so different than any other kind of debt, right? Because if you're borrowing a house or a car loan or a personal loan, like lenders want to know what your income is, what your job is, your credit. Like none of that really comes into play when you're borrowing federal loans, right? So that's a big deal. Like how much can we borrow to go to school? That in my opinion has kind of inflated the cost of attendance over the years because the schools were like, great, we can determine whatever the cost of attendance is and we'll be able to get loans for it and get paid for it, right? Is that how you saw it,
Basically
Sam?
like a blank check from the government, right? Because
Yeah.
people have to borrow, like people need an education, and most of us aren't sitting on these fat stacks of cash. You have to get it from somewhere.
Yeah. So I think that kind of encouraged colleges to not care about how much it cost because people could borrow for it. And there were income driven repayment plans where the payment could be based on income. So they didn't have to worry about, what their job prospects were post graduation and if they had a good paying job, so, which is crazy, right? Because that's the whole point of going to school is getting a good job, being able to pay your bills afterwards, like create a life that maybe you've always dreamed of or that your family's always dreamed of. Like having good income potential has been part of the sell for college. But income driven repayment plans, they were almost an out. Like if you didn't get a great paying job or if your loan balance was overwhelming in comparison to what your income was, that was the out. You had the income driven plan. We had loan forgiveness at the end of that income driven plan. We had programs like PSLF that can get loans forgiven a lot sooner too.
And I know a lot of people like to, kind of stick up their noses at these plans, but they're not inherently unfair because the
Hmm.
borrower is still paying a percentage of their discretionary income. It's not like well, I'm just going to like not pay anything or pay what I want. It's still tied to their income. So it's
Hmm.
still in a way trying to, calculate paying based off of what you're able to do.
Hmm. Yeah. And so we kind of refer to it as a tax on your income. And so, we can't totally control the cost of attendance. You can control where you go to an extent, right? But you can't totally control the cost of attendance, especially if your full focus is supposed to be school and graduate school. Like you're not really able to work to subsidize like the cost while you're going to grad school. But this is a direct quote from Senator Bill Cassidy, chair of the Senate Committee on Health, Labor, Education, and Pensions. And this was a statement he made on this past Tuesday, accompanying the release of this bill. He says, while Biden and Democrats unfairly attempted to shift student debt onto taxpayers that chose not to go to school, Republicans are taking on the root causes of the student debt crisis to lower the cost of attendance and improve Americans' access to opportunities that set them up for success. What do you think about that quote?
That's that's quite a hot take. That's like saying that the cost of public school has been shifted to taxpayers who chose not to have children. You live in a society, you pay tax. It goes to things that you benefit from, it goes to things you don't benefit from. That's how
Hmm.
taxes work.
Yeah. Yeah, and Sim, I didn't give you this intro. You've been on the podcast before, so folks know you. But just in case no one knows you, you're the chief tax officer for SLP Wealth here, so you know a lot about tax. And
I know a thing or two. I know that no one likes taxes. I don't like taxes either because I don't
yeah,
always get a
no one
say in
does.
where it goes to. But that's what it means to live in a community, to live in a society. There's no
Hmm.
such thing as being a sovereign citizen. So if that applies to you, we might not be the right show for you, but there's no such thing, right? Like it's just about participating in the society. These are the things that we do. We pay for roads, we pay for bridges, we pay for firefighters. God forbid, like most people never have a fire they have to deal with, but your tax dollars
Hmm.
still go to pay for that. So it's
Hmm.
like we're just cherry picking, right? Like we've taken this one issue and made a political talking point, but there's so much whataboutism.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good take. So to continue on, that was one quote. Let's actually get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the bill. So Senate Republicans basically they largely retained the changes to the federal student loan forgiveness and repayment plans that was proposed by the House. So that's what we were saying earlier, where it was similar. They didn't really change a lot. And so these big changes, let's kind of run through them. The first big change is a repeal of most of the income driven repayment plans, which provide the affordable monthly payments that we've been talking about based on income and family size and had loan forgiveness after either 20 or 25 years. Could have been shorter if you were eligible for PSLF. So that means that the bill would repeal ICR, income contingent repayment. Put a little star next to that though, because we'll talk about this when we come back to Parent Plus loans. Pay and save, which we were kind of banking on save going away. We thought that that was going to be the case. Like save was pretty much toast. But now there's some collateral damage. We have pay and ICR that's in the crosshairs now that originally wasn't part of the plan, right?
Oh,
We had
and new
ICR
IBR too.
and technically new IBR, which new IBR is part of IBR. So this is probably the most like frustrating and confusing thing to me as like a professional in this space because IBR was written into law and it was written to have two parts, old IBR and new IBR, and it had to do with when you borrowed. You're eligible for new IBR if you did not borrow before 2014, July 2014. And so that's not relevant to everybody, right? A lot of folks that we work with, they've had their loans for a while. Maybe they started borrowing for undergrad or grad school before 2014. But if you were a new borrower, borrowed July 2014 or after, your payment on IBR would be 10% of discretionary income and the loan forgiveness timeline would be 20 years. So it was almost exactly like pay as you earn. And it was written into legislation, so it was very safe. That's what we all thought, right? IBR, old IBR, if we borrowed before that time period, the payment is based on 15% of discretionary income, so 5% more, and it has a 25-year timeline to forgiveness. So that, 5 years longer, 5% more. That adds up to a lot more expensive than the new IBR calculation. And so they're threatening new IBR as well, which how can they cherry pick and do that? I don't know. I don't know. It makes me think that like contracts mean nothing these days, like terms and conditions. They're not for your benefit, they're for theirs. So they can argue, whatever they need to argue while you have the loan, and then they can change the terms when they want, is how
I'm
I take
wondering
it.
if we'll see any lawsuits come out of like specifically
Oh,
new IBR
I bet we
borrowers. I
will.
mean, that has to be a breach of contract, I would
Yes.
imagine.
That's what I would argue. And there probably will be class action lawsuits because the problem, like why I think we're so upset about this, and I'm sure like borrowers are as well, is because repealing these plans, like this isn't grandfathering folks in. This is saying like, nope, we're taking these away. And we'll get into some other quotes here in a second, but they're literally saying like our student loan system is broken. You know, schools have taken advantage of the cost, right? They've charged whatever they wanted. And folks have been victim to that. They've had to play along to go get their medical degree or go get their law degree. Like they've had to play along to go and go do the career that they wanted to do because they don't come from money. And now they're saying, yeah, the system's screwed, but so are you because we're going to change the terms on you right now. Like that just makes me like furious. And this is a very
To me, it
candid
just,
conversation with us today, just so you know.
well, to me, this just seems like part of a broader plan to disincentivize folks into getting education. Like it's a complete dismantling of our public education,
Hmm.
right? Because for those of you who don't know, I did a little bit of political science in college too. When you have a population that is divided, it is a lot easier to control people because you have them fighting each other instead of looking at the real problem, who is causing the
Mm-hmm.
infighting. So I think this is part of a bigger picture to really just yeah, it's to deprioritize education. And we kind of see this across the board. It's not just with college, it's kind of all the defunding they're trying to do of public education and not just, higher
Yeah.
education, right? It's harder to borrow, it's harder to pay off your loans. Like how is this going to help people get an education if you can't even pay for it unless you have some kind of like public free option, which they're not proposing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so the result of this, if this passes, again, this is all like if this all passes and they take away ICR pay, save, new IBR, the result would be basically everyone gets rolled over onto the old IBR plan, which is that 15% of discretionary income, 25 years to forgiveness. But then the second part to this is they are saying, oh, but we'll create this new plan. Don't worry, we'll create this new plan that's beneficial. So their plan is they want to bring out a plan called RAP. And Travis has talked a little bit about this already. It stands for Repayment Assistance Plan, or RAP for short. Similar to the other income-driven plans, it's based on monthly, basically the monthly payments are based on the borrower's income, about 10% of discretionary income. There would be some interest subsidies associated with it. And that basically interest subsidies are discounts on the interest because if your income is low enough, like your payment could not be touching the principal and interest, right? And so that means that the balance is going to balloon. That's what people say. People go and find folks who have the worst like ballooned balances to talk on the news about how like backwards the system is. But it's true, it can happen. Your income could be low enough to where your balance grows and basically balloons and explodes to where you have two, three, four times what you owed initially due on your balance in the future, even though you've been making on time payments on your income driven plan. So RAP would have some kind of interest subsidy that prevents that or reduces that to prevent like runaway balance growth. And but the problem with RAP, there's a couple problems. It would stretch over 30 years. So we were talking about 20 and 25 years for loan forgiveness, but now we're talking about 30, which is like the
Now it's a
same as
mortgage.
a mortgage. Yeah, exactly. And the other problem is all of the other income driven plans, except for repay back in the day, if you remember repay, they allow you to exclude spousal income from your payment equation if you file taxes married separately. RAP would not allow you to exclude your spouse's income. So you would have a payment based on you and your spouse's income, no matter what, if you were on RAP. So even though the payment calculation is a little lower, 10%, the payment would be based on 10% of your household income, not just your income. So this could disincentivize people literally from getting married, right? That used to be a thing. Like back when people thought repay was the only option, it wasn't back in the day, but people would come to us and be like, "Well, we haven't gotten married because we don't want our payment to go up." And
Yes,
at the
so much for
time,
good old-fashioned family values.
I know. Like this
Whoops.
could incentivize no marriage or divorce, honestly. And like I mean, it's pretty wild. So that's the proposal right now for RAP. It's a longer plan, 30 years to forgiveness, and then it requires you to include spousal income. The bill, so a couple other things that the bill would do is it eliminates eligibility for student loan or PSLF payment counts to be eligible or qualifying during medical or dental residency, which that's a problem, right? Because
That's like several years of credit that should
several
be,
years
it's rightfully earned.
rightfully earned. Those are like the trenches for you guys. Like residency is, it's not like a walk in the park when you're doing residency. It's not like,
It's
oh yeah, let's
employment.
just, yeah, it's employment.
It literally meets the criteria, which I don't know how that's legal. I'm very I mean, they'd have to do it for future borrowers. I don't know how they could do that to current borrowers.
I know. Or we'll see a class action. So that's frustrating. The bill preserves PSLF as it is in any other way, though. That was the biggest like target was just, medical and dental residents, you know, too bad, so sad. Can't get credit in residency, which is stupid to me.
Isn't that who
Um,
you like want to benefit from the program?
yeah, I mean, well, and a lot of programs are naturally PSLF eligible. Like it's more common for your PSLF or for your residency to be at a teaching hospital, like a nonprofit hospital.
Yeah,
And so,
I think I've met like one resident where they couldn't count it. Like all of my
yeah,
residents and then the ones who go on to do fellowship have all been able to
yeah,
count it for the most part.
it's not common for it not to count. And so that's frustrating. I'd love to, and the rationale there is just because they know now that like that's a lower income that they're earning. And so they're getting credit on lower income towards PSLF. And then they flip into attending and they've got, 4, 5, 6 years of higher payments to qualify towards PSLF. So that it's almost like they're just like they're taking out any kind of it's not even a sneaky benefit. Like it's how it is. Like that's how
It's
your
just
career trajectory goes.
it's taking advantage of lower income people.
Yes, it
And we already
is.
know to begin with that residents are woefully underpaid for how many hours a week they're forced to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, people burn out in residency. People leave medicine in residency because it's so hard. And we're
Yeah.
going to take away a benefit that helps them like manage their debt load and like keep their stress at bay so they could focus on like being a good doctor. Like, do you want your doctors and your medical professionals to be stressed about money? And like, I don't know, it's crazy. So that's one really makes us mad. Another, let's see. They would repeal some Biden era regulations that have made it easier for borrowers to qualify for student loan forgiveness or cancellation, really. based on certain kinds of school misconduct or campus closure, which that's an insane sentence to read. Like we're going to repeal what helps you get your loans canceled for when a school has misconduct or lies to you and misleads you to enroll in their program where we're going to take that option off the table. What? I would like someone to explain to me why they put that in there. I don't know. That one really gets under my skin.
And there's no accountability because if the school closed,
There's
who do you go
no
after?
accountability. Yes, there's no accountability. So it's just like too bad, too sad. It's like why even try? And that's like you're saying, like maybe that's what they're trying to incentivize, just like less educated public. Next up was restrict the Department of Education's authority to enact new regulations, expanding pathways to student loan forgiveness and other debt relief. So this is kind of in retaliation to what Biden did over his terms, bringing these different options to the table with, the IDR waiver, the PSLF waiver that right righted some wrongs. Is that the way to say it? Like fixed
Yeah.
problems that were
Yes.
systemic in the student loan situation, or in the student loan world, I mean, where servicers were literally not following the rules and not helping borrowers like accomplish what was written in their terms and conditions. Those things were to fix those issues, to get people across the finish line that should have gotten loan forgiveness, but were literally blackwalled, from getting access to that. So they're saying they're taking, they're gonna just whatever. That's not allowed anymore, right? We can't make things better for people. Let's see, eliminate graduate plus programs and specifically limit parent plus programs. So this is actually something I want to touch on a lot because this could impact a lot of things. We talked a little bit about how for graduate school, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance, whatever it is, between unsubsidized loans and graduate plus loans. Interestingly, you can do the same thing with parent plus loans for undergrad. So if you're a parent and you have an undergraduate student going to college, they can borrow loans under their own name, but it's limited for undergraduate loans. They can borrow only really up to 29,000 for their whole like education. Parents can go and borrow the rest. So if the cost of attendance for undergrad, like we talked about earlier, is like 60, 70,000 a year, you can only borrow 5,500 for your first year as a freshman under your own name. So obviously, that's not enough. So parents would then go borrow Parent Plus loans, which are federal loans under the name of the parent. And they were similar to federal loans that you could borrow as yourself as the student, but they had more limited access to income-driven plans. There was a loophole that we took advantage of, the double consolidation loophole that got us access to all the income-driven plans. But basically, those two loan types, Parent Plus loans and Graduate Plus loans, had no limits. And now they want to put limits on it. So, what do you think about that, Sam?
Okay, the raw reaction is that stinks and that is classist. And the long version is this is going to only, I think we're going to see if this actually passes. And I have to keep reminding myself this hasn't passed.
I know we're
But
getting worked up, but
this is
we're
like
ready to fight.
but this is like so grossly unfair. Like this is just education for the rich, right? Like I was taught a narrative. I'm a child of immigrants, and I was told this narrative that like you come to this country, you work hard, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and I believed that. I was like, anyone can make a way for themselves here,
hmm
and we're just going to kind of. And it's already harder for some people to begin with because of different systemic issues. Not everyone has the same opportunity to quote unquote lift themselves up by the bootstraps, but these types of programs level the playing field, and we're just going to start
Yeah.
taking those away, really.
Yeah. And I think on one hand, people have said this to me before when we've talked about like before all of this madness, like talking about student loan forgiveness. People have said this to me before, like, well, why don't they just cap how much you can borrow? And yeah, that could be a solution to control more of what the schools are doing, right? But now we're creeping into like, are we a capitalist society? Like, can we still charge what we want for our own services? Like, would you want someone coming into your business and saying, hey, by the way, you can only charge, X amount for your chiropractic session or X amount for your therapy session? Like, no, that wouldn't happen, right? And so
I feel like a
now,
more reasonable solution would be like to hold the colleges accountable. Like, okay, it's true the
yes.
taxpayers are footing a lot of this because these are public funds to, grant the student loans for the colleges. So what if we force colleges to meet certain metrics, like an X
Hmm.
percentage of your students have to be employed within, 1
Hmm.
year, or they have to make this much or something, like put some
Yeah.
some metrics in there, because a lot of these professions are professions that benefit all of us, that we all as a society benefit from. So if we can put some kind of accountability into place, the colleges have an incentive to make sure their students graduate and that they have gainful employment, and that these loans are really an investment into our
Hmm.
society.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be a solution. You know why it's probably not? Because it's harder for them to execute. Like, it's easier just to put a cap on how much the school can. Well, and actually, let me back up. This doesn't technically put a cap on how much the school can say the cost of attendance is. It just puts a cap on how much funding is easily accessible. So they're talking about basically capping how much we can borrow on, the federal level for both parents and for the students. That doesn't mean that you can't go and get private student loans, but private student loans have their own problems. They are just true debt. There's no income-driven plans associated with private loans. You kind of commit to the term that you commit to when you borrow the loan. Hopefully you can refinance it later, but you probably have
Most
to have a cosigner,
most
right?
yeah most 18-year-olds are not going to be able to qualify. They're going to need a cosigner, which means
Yeah.
more, older folks are going to be on the hook for these loans too.
Yes. And
And a lot
interest
of them
rates,
have these sneaky provisions of, like,
yeah.
if one of the cosigners dies, it's due immediately upon death. It's not true for all of them, but a lot of
Hmm.
them say that. Or some of them have like prepayment penalties. So if you're like, well, I got a good job and like I'm lucky I can just pay this off, they might
Hmm.
not want you to pay it off all at once because they want to profit off of the interest rate, which can be pretty draconian, painful.
Yeah. And it can be high. The interest rates can be high too. And so when folks have private loans, we're telling folks like, okay, let's look at refinancing to see if we can get this rate any lower. Find a company that offers like good terms, like no prepayment penalties. You can maybe release a cosigner after a couple years of on-time payments. That could relieve like your parent or whoever's on the loan with you. So there's ways that you could make private loans better, but what I'm saying here is this would, one, probably not encourage colleges to be less greedy when it comes to how much they're charging for the cost of attendance because people can go borrow private loans. So that would be part of their award package. They'd say, "Hey, you could borrow X amount under your name as a student from the federal system, only up to this amount. Parents, you could borrow only up to this amount in the federal system under your name. And oh, by the way, there's also this other option, a private student loan you can access to, borrow and cover the cost of attendance." And what's wild about this is, they present it as if it's an award. This is an award for you to be able to borrow and come to my college. That's literally the terminology they use. Like, here's your award package. Um, and so a lot of times folks like they're it's so tough because it's such an exciting time like going to school, like getting into that independence or feeling like you're getting into that independence for the first time as a student, right? Like moving out, moving to a different state, maybe going to your dream college. And they're throwing numbers at you and it's just not computing. You're thinking like, "Oh, this is just what it is. This is what it's like to go to college. Everybody has loans." It's so normalized. And so the federal system, thankfully, has made it easier and more manageable on the payment side, no matter what your income is post graduation. Private loans are not going to be that way. And if you have both federal and private student loans upon graduation, you're going to have two payments. One that's not based on income, one that's maybe based on income. They also have options that are not based on income in the federal system, but you'll have two lenders that you're paying. And that's a huge tax on your income coming out of school if you're not really thinking about the total cost, like what the total bill is going to be at the end of the day. And so many people don't do that. And so many people don't come to us at the beginning of their student journey, like their college journey. Like we hear from folks after they've already borrowed the loans. And, that's a problem in and of itself. But, you know, would like knowing the facts and knowing the numbers, knowing what the possible monthly payments would be post graduation, would that change people's minds, like initially going to school or going to that school in particular, or I don't know. And
I
so
think you have to
there's a
start
lot of
early with like financial
yeah.
literacy too.
Yeah, financial literacy, and that's not standardized across the US. So
Mm-mm.
there's people don't know how loans work. I literally didn't know how a credit card worked when I was in college. You know, I was asking my boss, like, what is a credit card? Like, what does it do? He couldn't answer it. And he was like a 28-year-old manager at my gym that I worked at. So
Yeah,
financial
I think I was
literacy.
I think I was like 20 or 21 when I got my first credit card. I was like afraid
hmm
of them.
Yeah, I was afraid because I didn't know what they were. No one could explain it to me. And so, like, financial education, just the basic stuff is not there, like in school. And unless your parents are teaching you that, or you're seeking out that information on your own, like proactively, you're going to be stuck in a trap where it's like you were, rightfully or wrongfully ignorant before doing something, and you learn later the hard way, which is a really hard way to learn a lesson. It's a really unfortunate way to learn lessons.
An expensive way to learn a lesson.
Yeah. So the limits, the loan limits, I think they're concerning because, like you said, it doesn't help with accessibility. So that quote I said earlier, like, yeah, right, that does not help with accessibility. It could create more like serious and kind of dangerous loan types, private loans being that, in the sense of like they're not as forgiving as federal loans. They don't have the income driven repayment options, and so that could be a rude awakening.
I think it could also change like the face of what these professions look like. When you think about medicine, it's already not necessarily the most like diverse field, but to have, people of color not necessarily have access to loans, and they might not even have access to the private loans either, right? Because
hmm
historically they've been left out or they've been given like subprime rates. And so it could make medicine just look more white. And we know that that's going to
Yeah.
impact health outcomes for the public. So this is like
hmm
not just a problem with education, but it really is a problem that impacts, it's like a spider web. It's like going to impact different levels of society.
hmm Yeah. It doesn't help like the need for these professionals either. Like there's a need for, I think, there was a year where pharmacists were like way over. There was a lot of pharmacists who were graduating and not enough jobs. But I think there's a need for other medical professionals that like there's not an incentive now to go to school. Like it's not helpful. Like there are not like ways to get through school as easy as there have been if this is to pass. So those are just some thoughts too.
And if you look at like, and I pick on medicine just because I know them really well, but like physicians, it's not a secret. They burn out in their profession a lot.
hmm
And a lot of like the
Yeah.
financial blogosphere is like dedicated to like, financial independence or like buy these alternative
hmm
investments. You can get out of your career faster. And we're going to sit here and make it harder for people to enter medicine when we have this exodus kind of
hmm
amongst us.
Yeah. So, and then the last piece to this that I think it's worth noting right now is the restriction of affordable repayment options for Parent Plus borrowers specifically. Right now, Parent Plus loans, as they are, do not have access to income driven plans. But if you consolidate them, they do have access to one income driven plan called ICR, Income Contingent Repayment. And they are basically taking this away. They're taking away the income driven plan for Parent Plus folks if this bill were to pass. And the scary part too is that folks already have Parent Plus loans, right? These are not new loan types. They are the fastest growing loan types of federal student loans out there because of how crazy the cost of attendance for undergraduate schools have gotten.
This
And
is probably the most offensive part of everything. Think about the
yeah,
profile, like who's a Parent Plus borrower. These are folks like in their 50s and 60s, like they're about to
yeah,
retire and
mm-hmm,
they have like six up to, oftentimes six figures of debt.
yeah,
So they're going to be in their retirement years, hopefully, right? Or some of them are thinking they're not even going to retire. You're going to have like grandpa working at Walmart just to pay Uncle Sam.
yeah, yeah, working literally until they die. And so the problem with this too is like if you have Parent Plus loans now, like you're still not safe with how this bill is written. It's saying, hey, if you're not already on an income driven plan by the time this bill is approved or passed, then you don't have access to income driven plans either. So it's like everybody has to be paying attention everybody with Parent Plus loans especially has to be paying attention to what the heck is going on in the student loan system. Oh, and by the way, the Department of Ed, they're not sending out mass notices about all this craziness going on in the court system, right? Like you're not getting updates from them on what could happen and what you should be doing to better position yourself for this madness, right? So it is like you're alone, right? And unless you're paying attention to things yourself. You're subscribed to like Student Loan Planner, for example, or to us talking about student loan planning, like you're going to be left in the dark. And people were left in the dark about the IDR waiver, the PSLF waiver. Like we still had conversations with folks after all of that stuff ended that could have taken advantage of it if they just knew about it. And
Well, the servicers were not really equipped to serve, right? They were so
yeah.
underfunded. They didn't really have good training. They had constant staff turnover. Like they didn't know what to do. And some of these things were coming out very quickly, so they didn't have time to adapt, let alone properly advise borrowers on what their options were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so another quote from Senator Cassidy. American higher education has lost its purpose. Students are graduating with degrees that don't get them a job and insurmountable debt that they can't pay back. This guy is talking out of both sides of his mouth right now. He's like such a. Okay, let me finish it. We need to fix our broken higher education system so it prioritizes student success and ensures Americans have skills to compete in a 21st century economy. President Trump and Senate Republicans are focused on delivering results for American families, and this bill does just that. Yeah, Senator Cassidy, this bill delivers something, and it delivers like a lot of issues for people who were already part of this student loan disaster that had no choice, had no other options, and knew what the terms and conditions said, like when they borrowed or after they borrowed, they knew how they were going to tackle their student loans, and now they're completely lost in the dark. And they're yeah, this is going to break everybody down. Like this is I like this comment to me is nutso because he's like, "Oh, we're doing everybody a service." No, if everybody was grandfathered into how things were when people borrowed and when the system was so messed up, and then these changes went into effect later, sure, I'd be way more on board with that because there's planning we could do around it for people who have not borrowed loans yet to still get them through school. But basically telling folks like, yeah, we're changing all this stuff for the better of you and for the better of education. It's like spitting in people's faces saying like, I don't care about what how this is going to affect you. Or I didn't even think about how this was going to affect you, right? That's almost what it tells me. It's like he didn't even think about how this affects people who already have the loans, who were part of the broken higher education system that had no choice but to be there at the time that they were there, right? So I don't know, rant over.
It's a
What do you
real,
want to say?
real head scratcher. It's almost as if they don't care. And it's
Yeah.
really veiled language what they're saying about like, getting a higher education or whatever, getting skills. I feel like what they're really saying is they want everyone to just have like STEM degrees. Like other degrees don't have value. They're not skilled. Like no one should be getting like a major in arts or something. And I think that's such a wrong way to think about education. Like what kind of society do we want? I guess that's the question I keep coming back to is what kind of society do we want? Isn't it going to be such a boring society to only have STEM majors? Like think about what you do on Friday nights and the weekends. Like we need those arts and science majors. Like it's what makes life beautiful. We're
Hmm.
not all just going to be like robotic doing numbers, says the
Hmm.
financial planner, but
Yeah, there are some quotes like that go against this, of course. So this one was from Alex Lundrigan. Lundrigan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. He's a policy manager of Young Invincibles. He says, he or she, sorry, I'm not sure if it's a he or she. There's no way to see this reconciliation legislation other than as a blatant attack on student loan borrowers and young people striving for economic opportunity. The changes to repayment plans will skyrocket monthly payments, even mine, limit access to college for low income students, and stifle upward mobility for millions. But the cruelest below, these cuts are being used to bankroll massive tax breaks for corporations and the ultra wealthy, offering no real relief for working and middle class Americans during a cost of living crisis. It's a gut wrenching reversal of national priorities. Fair. I stand behind that too.
pretty reasonable.
So, um, So we did this episode just to kind of one vent, honestly, to just kind of explain like we're we hear you. Like we're upset as well. And we're stressed about this as well because it affects a lot of people's financial plans. It affects, people's money. It really messes with just your head about like what's allowed to happen. Are terms and conditions actually on your side as a borrower? And in my mind, no. Based on some of these things here. This is just a proposal. So hopefully this vent session is all for naught. Hopefully there's some improvements or some grandfathering effect. That would be really nice for them to come back with. And this is not over. There's going to be continued conversations. It's got a long process to actually get signed into law. So don't, I wouldn't stress about this being effective now, but we are going to prepare people for the worst. That's going to be kind of our next step as your financial planners, as your student loan consultants. Prepare for the worst. And that's kind of what we've always done. We've had, our plan A, plan B, sometimes a plan C to pivot to. So we'll be doing that with you in future meetings. Or if you're someone who's really concerned about this, like you can reach out for either a student loan consult with Student Loan Planner, studentloanplanner.com, or if you want ongoing financial planning assistance, including the student loan maintenance over time, because it sounds like things are going to be changing a lot and we don't know exactly when these things are going to be implemented, then definitely become a financial planning client of ours. We do comprehensive financial planning along with the student loan advice. But we're here for you. We're going to follow this very closely and make sure we tell folks, what you should and shouldn't be paying attention to, what you should and shouldn't be doing to kind of prepare for what this will, how this will unravel, basically. But
I
any
always
parting
think that
words?
I always like to tell people to advocate. So even with everything, I still say contact your local congressperson and your
Yes. Yeah.
senator and
Sorry.
continue to advocate. Um, Vote. Please make sure to vote. A lot of people did not vote in the last election. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
like a third of people who could vote did not.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that a lot of the people who did not vote were people who were impacted by this. So don't be a silent participant. Don't prematurely acquiesce. Fight back. And then know what you owe. It's always good to know your loan details. I know that a lot of people feel disempowered or a sense of shame about their student loans. Take a look at it. It's corny, but knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
Know what you owe, know your interest rates, maybe just print off a copy and keep on your desktop, because we do see loan servicers making mistakes. We've seen a number of people who have loans at Mohela who are in the safe forbearance having interest accrual when they're not supposed to. So just know your stats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good advice. Make sure your email address is updated on your student loan servicer website and the studentaid.gov website. They're two separate websites, but both of those are crucial to have access to make sure you're getting timely information about your loans. Again, they're not doing a great job they're not talking about these court cases at all, not in mass communications. So find others that can relay that information to you. Follow sources online, like Adam Minsky, for example, Student Loan Planner. We have a newsletter that we send out every Thursday to keep people posted on what's going on. And then SLP Wealth, we have a newsletter every Friday that will have a student loan flavor, but also talk about other financial planning stuff going on in the world. So information is power. And we're trying to put as much information out there as possible on how we can help and what we can do during all of this. But thanks for hanging out. I felt like this was kind of a friend vent sesh today. So thanks for doing that with me,
We
Sin.
had to.
We had to,
This
yeah.
It's real. We have to react to it.
Yeah. So, and we'll have more helpful episodes in the future on like action items, like what you should be doing, what you could be doing, those types of things. So stay tuned. And we'll catch you on the next one. I hope you have a good weekend, regardless of this madness. Take one step towards bettering your financial future this weekend. And maybe that's just making sure your information is updated on your student loan servicer websites and studentaid.gov. That's one easy step to take. But have a great weekend, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Are you ready to unlock financial freedom faster with SLP Wealth? Get high quality, affordable, student loan aware financial planning and get the best deal for it anywhere that you're going to find working with your own dedicated SLP Wealth financial planner that is able to give you the best integrated advice across financial planning, investments, and tax, along with all the student loan hacks that you know you need and that you know impact all other areas of your financial planning. The deal you're going to find here is special just for podcast listeners. If you go to promo.slpwealth.com, you can sign up with a great discount off your first month. That's promo.slpwealth.com.